Good morning, welcome to Catex TV. My name is Frank Fortunato. Today is Monday, November 10th, 2014. You can follow us on Twitter and Catex TV. A Lear jet crashed in the Bahamas yesterday at about 5:30 p.m. The plane exploded on impact when it collided with a crane at the Grand Bahama shipyard and then plunged into a junkyard as it was making its landing approach for Grand Bahama at about 5:10 p.m., about an hour after takeoff from Nassau, also in the Bahamas. All 9 people on board were killed, including a pastor, Miles Monroe, who is the head of the the Bahamas Faith Ministry. The Bahamas government has issued a statement of condolences to his remaining relatives. The London market is at a tipping point, apparently, as it fails to capture opportunities in emerging markets. This is according to a new report. You may recall that the Lloyd's Vision 2025 is heavily based upon the success of Lloyd's penetrating emerging markets. There have been some rumors now that report, the Vision 2025 plan, has been de-emphasized. It's no longer available in its totality, for example, on the Lloyd's website. According to the London Market Group and the Boston Consulting Group, a research report has been put together saying that London is only tracking global growth in commercial insurance while it's losing its share in the reinsurance market. London's share declined from 15% to 13% between 2010 and 2013. The market's heavily reliant on the UK, US, Australia, and Canadian markets, with only half of 1% of the absolute growth in emerging market premiums in markets such as Latin America, Asia, and Africa are being placed in London. That's not particularly good news. Its share of the Asian insurance market, for example, is currently just 2%. The London market also reached £60 billion of gross premium in 2013. 45 billion of this was written in London and backed by London Capital. The study shows that based on business written in London, the market is nearly double the size of Bermuda and Zurich and 11 times bigger than the market in Singapore. A suicide bomber disguised in a school uniform got into an assembly of 2,000 students earlier this morning in the northeastern Nigerian city of Potiskum and detonated himself, killing at least 48 students. When soldiers arrived at the grisly scene, they were apparently assaulted by crowds throwing stones and yelling insults at them because they were angry at the military's inability to halt a 5-year Boko Haram insurgency in the area. U.S. primary insurer Allstate has hailed its current reinsurance program as being the best coverage it's ever had because of the availability of low-cost insurance-linked securities, plus the dip in reinsurance premiums. Allstate says they have $1.2 billion of fully collateralized reinsurance obtained through cat bonds. This provides protection over 4- and 5-year terms. They've also dipped into the traditional reinsurance market to protect its lower end of their program and to reduce its retention. Allstate's executive says, "We have the best coverage we believe we've ever had, and we have multiple sources, both the traditional reinsurance program and the cat bond. So we're covered over a longer period of time." So this is what's been going on, obviously, as reinsurance prices dropped. Allstate's one of the biggest buyers in the United States, and they're taking advantage of it. Global regulators in Basel, Switzerland, earlier today proposed new rules to ensure that bank creditors, rather than taxpayers, pick up the bill if and when a big lender collapses. Mark Carney, chairman of the Financial Stability Board and the governor of the Bank of England, said the plans marked a watershed in ending banks that are too big to be allowed to fail. After the financial crisis in 2007 to 2009, governments had to spend billions of dollars of taxpayer money to rescue banks that had run into trouble and could have threatened the global economy if they collapsed. Since then, regulators from the group of 20 economies have been trying to find ways to prevent this from happening again. The plan envisages that global banks such as Goldman Sachs and HSBC should have a buffer of bonds or equity equivalent to at least 16 to 20% of their risk-weighted assets, like loans, starting in January of 2019. These bonds would be converted into equity to help shore up a stricken bank. The bank's total buffer would include the minimum mandatory core capital requirements that the bank already must maintain to bolster their defenses against future crises. 30 big global banks would be deemed to be qualifying for this. Meanwhile, in a similar story, Matt Taibbi, who's a prominent journalist, a bit of a muckraker perhaps, writing in, of all places, the Rolling Stone magazine, has come out with a report that is raising eyebrows throughout the financial community. He's citing a whistleblower, a woman named Elaine Fleshman, a former due diligence manager for J.P. Morgan Chase, who was laid off in 2008, saying that she witnessed, quote, a massive criminal securities fraud in the bank's mortgage operations during the period leading up to the financial crisis. In 2012, Fleshman began working with federal prosecutors in California who were pursuing a criminal inquiry. Mr. Taibbi writes that the Justice Department used the threat of Fleshman's testimony to extract a $13 billion civil settlement last year. The penalty included $4 billion in relief for struggling homeowners, which Mr. Taibbi termed, quote, an accounting falsehood. The New York Times reported at the time that the, quote, final figure, the New York Times reported, quote, that the final $13 billion figure may be as much political theater as a real attempt to right wrongs. Fleshman recounts a number of warnings she gave to J.P. Morgan executives. These conversations were recounted in a statement of facts that were part of the civil settlement and reprinted in an earlier Wall Street Journal article. It's a very interesting story because after the savings and loan crisis in the United States in the 80s, a number of executives actually went to jail. The bank crisis in 08 and 09 was of a far greater size, and not only has nobody gone to jail, but very few, only one criminal charge has ever been brought. You can be sure that this story will be pursued by other journalists now. The remnants of Typhoon Nuri are now affecting the continental United States weather. Heavy snow is predicted in the northern high plains. Close to a foot is expected today in northern parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the upper peninsula of Michigan. Meanwhile, for the balance of the country, the jet stream disturbance caused by the remnants of Typhoon Nurni is going to drop temperatures to about 25 degrees below what their expected temperature range should be at this time of year. President Obama is in Beijing on the first leg of a 10-day Asian trip. He's saying that the governments of Asia are very close to a, quote, historic pan-Asian trade agreement. We'll see what happens there. That's the news for today. If we have any breaking news, we'll come back and tell you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.